morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the debut album from BPMD entitled American Made. BPMD is a new collaborative effort comprised of Bobby Blitz of Overkill, Phil Demmel of Machine Head and Violence, Mark Mengy, a key player in the organization and formation of another all-star metal project, Metal Allegiance, and the one and only Mike Portnoy, who in the past has played with everyone from Dream Theater to Twisted Sister to Avenged Sevenfold, but most recently has been working with a prog metal supergroup named Sons of Apollo. A lot of talent there, to say the least, but despite that, there's a lot about American Made that leaves room for concern. For one, the hyper-extreme and gritty thrash metal sound I'm sure many of you would expect a lineup like this to perform has been set aside for a more traditional American hard rock and heavy metal formula. And expanding on that, BPMD also isn't performing any original material on here, instead opting to play covers of classic songs from Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, Def Leppard, Van Halen, ZZ Top, songs incredibly influential to these individual musicians and to the development of American hard rock and heavy metal itself, actively relishing in the nostalgia of the glory days of rock and roll. I'm sure to the delight of many older metalheads and rock listeners who believe that the modern landscape of rock music is devoid of substance and quality. To put it very simply, this album by design panders immediately, exclusively even, to boomer metalheads who miss the days when they could fuck, drink, smoke, and fight without consequence. To the point where I'm sure by this point in the video, somebody has said something to the effect of, "You're a millennial. What do you know about rock music? Modern music sucks." Cardi B, more like Farty B, get owned, liberal. I think it goes without saying that with all this in mind, I was not particularly excited for this record, especially since all the promo singles leading up to its release have been mediocre at best. But I gotta be honest with y'all, as much as I expected this to be a total clusterfuck, it actually turned out to be, dare I say, genuinely entertaining, honest, and transparent. Is it going to win awards for originality? Absolutely not. And on a similar note, don't expect this to be in my top 10 at the end of the year. But it ultimately, despite its flaws, succeeds at what it needs to succeed at. It is a simple, accessible, meat and potatoes, classic rock, heavy metal record that people from the 70s and early 80s will love. And for that matter, the people that grew up listening to Overkill, Dream Theater, Machine Head will likely appreciate as well. Credit immediately has to go to the instrumental members of this band. Mike Portnoy, Phil Demmel, even Mark Mengy. They work fantastic together. I actually think this is a bit of a redemption record for Phil Demmel in particular, as the last record we heard him on would have been Catharsis from Machine Head, an album in which he felt so creatively restrained that it forced him to leave the band. Mark Mengy as well, I'm honestly pretty impressed by. The bass has a nice, healthy presence throughout the record, and he's able to hold his own with some incredibly technical, accomplished musicians like the aforementioned Demmel, and of course, Mike Portnoy, who I'm sure, as you can imagine, sounds great. Do we even need to talk about Portnoy? You know he's great. Of course he's great. Because he's fucking great. These guys are consistently the best thing about this record. They play with a spirit not too dissimilar from the spirits of many of the acts that they represent on this album. And in some cases, they are able to make some subtle and even important and necessary changes. Take, for instance, Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers, originally by ZZ Top. What was once a raucous, boogie-friendly southern rock number is a lot more gritty, a lot more metallic, more in line with mid-late 70s Judas Priest. Still a little bit of that southern spice, obviously. It's kind of hard to remove that from a ZZ Top song, but nonetheless, they have effectively transformed this number. Similarly, Saturday Night Special, originally by Lynyrd Skynyrd, also has a much more mid-70s Judas Priest flair to it. even with some extra early mid-90s Machine Head grooves, courtesy of the aforementioned Phil Demmel, and some really tight explosive drumming, making this feel a little bit more climactic rather than slow and drawling in comparison to the original. I gotta say, their version of Tattoo Vampire, originally by Blue Oyster Cult, is kind of a banger as well, kind of leaning into Overkill's classic piss and vinegar punky thrash metal sound. Although now that we've mentioned Overkill, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room, Mr. Bobby Blitz, who just doesn't sound very good almost consistently throughout the album. I mean, bless his heart, he's trying. He's putting out just as much energy and spitfire as everyone else in the band. He's clearly having a fucking blast, and I won't take that from him. But respectfully, I do not think that his nasally snarls, shrieks, and shouts transition very well to more melodic hard rock and heavy metal. It works fine in the context of Overkill's typical meat-headed thrash, but to say that Bobby Blitz does not have the technical capability, the vocal range to reach the heights of so many of the singers on here is an understatement. Particularly when you get to numbers that rely on a little bit more charisma and a little bit more sex appeal. Take, for instance, Toys in the Attic, originally by Aerosmith. What sounded suave, manic, and exciting in the hands of a very young Steven Tyler simply doesn't translate in the hands of early 60s Bobby Blitz. Although the worst offender here is easily Wang Dang Sweet Poontang. Not only does he completely flop in delivering the song's signature chorus, but there's just something inherently kind of gross, creepy, even cringeworthy about, again, a man in his early 60s ranting, raving, and screeching about trying to get some, well, poontang. On top of that, as the album goes on, the covers themselves begin to lose a little bit of steam, and BPMD's attempts to simply metalize everything don't work. Not only are you eventually reminded of the original tracks, but you're quickly reminded of other pre-existing versions of some of these iconic songs that are almost objectively better. Take, for instance, We're an American Band. This is a song I've heard plenty of times over the years, and here it just sounds kind of run-of-the-mill. Not incompetent, not poorly arranged, just average. Compare that to Rob Zombie's cover version, and it's an almost night and day difference. Rob Zombie managed to take that song and infuse it with his industrial party metal spirit. Or the track Evil, originally a blues standard by Howling Wolf, that has been covered by hundreds of artists over the years, and therefore, by default, has to be updated. But instead, BPMD decided to practically plagiarize, note for note, the version made famous by Cactus in the early mid-70s. Listening to BPMD is the equivalent to discovering that the cover band that plays in your local bar is actually kinda decent. Like, you probably wouldn't buy an album, and you certainly would not pick them over any of the artists that they are themselves covering, but you're enjoying it enough that you're willing to sit down, have a couple beers, order some chicken wings, and you wouldn't openly object if you saw them playing at Rib Fest or a local fundraiser or a block party. With this in mind, I'd give this a semi-enthusiastic 2.5 out of 5. I wish the album was more consistent, and I wish that they were doing more to transform these numbers, but it's got energy, it's got spirit, and despite its warts, particularly those found on the face of Bobby Blitz, it can be genuinely quite fun. Like, I would have no issue turning this on at the next family barbecue, which, granted, we'll have to wait like a year, because, you know, quarantine, but nonetheless, that's hardly BPMD's fault. It might make a decent gateway, too, for younger metalheads to learn about some classic rock and heavy metal, so, you know, no harm done if that's the case as well. But I will say that next time around, I would much prefer to have an original album, because the few original spices that can be found here are easily the best things about this project. 2.5 out of 5. It's okay. It's totally fine so long as you know exactly what you're getting into before you press play. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right there so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.